Hello everybody, this is Graeme, and today I'm going to be looking at a game called Pampero. Now, with the theme in this rather large game box is all about the production and distribution of energy and fulfilling contracts. Now, Uruguay is concerned about its reliance on fossil fuels, so this game explores kind of the green energy possibilities through the building of wind turbines and electrical distribution. And with that generated energy, you also need to store it in the form of, well, batteries. And hopefully you can sell those batteries to the neighboring countries, Argentina and Brazil. Now, the gameplay is really one of hand management. Each round you'll be taking 3 actions, and most of those actions are going to be playing a card from your hand. You start with the same basic action cards as everyone else, but through the game you can upgrade them to make them more powerful or maybe get extra scoring cards. And when you play a card, you're often using a component on the game board, like a bulldozer or an electrical tower. But they don't have to be your own. If you use someone else's component, then you pay them the money instead of paying it to the bank. And since this game is a fairly tight economy between energy, batteries, and money, giving anything to other players is a tough call. But sometimes it's just worth it, especially if you're not in that area. The game also has a mechanism that I also enjoy. You play cards and they're down until you take one of your 3 actions to retrieve them. But at the end of every 3 actions, you do get to take the rightmost card back into your hand, which makes that planning even more important. So, will this game be like a nice, cool, refreshing breeze on a hot autumn day? Or will it more be like a tornado and just avoid it at all costs? Let's get it to the table, see how it's played, and then come back for my final thoughts on Pampero. And I will say there are a lot of little rules in this game, and the rule set is fairly large, so I have tried to condense and skip as much as possible, but it is still a rather lengthy overview. But anyway, we'll come back for my final thoughts on Pampero. So here's Pampero set up. I'm only showing half of the board in this overview as it will not fit completely in my setup here. I will also just be doing a high-level overview to give you the gist of how the game works and not get into too many details. Now, the tower board is set off to one side. It is set up with A, B, and C bonuses. Shuffle and place the specialist action and scoring cards off to one side. Then draw the top 3 of each. For the neighboring countries, Argentina and Brazil, Brazil is on the side you can't see. Shuffle the decks and deal out 3 cards face up. The solo contracts are shuffled and placed into their spot. Separate all the construction tiles into the A and the B or C. Place each connection tile on the appropriate space. Place 2 random scoring tiles. All the contract tiles are placed onto the board in their matching spots. The remote contracts are shuffled and placed on their matching spots. There are 6 batteries per player added to the battery storage section of the board, and these are limited. All the money and venture capital tiles are placed within reach of all players. For the player setup, each player gets a board and all of their pieces. Action markers are placed on one side of your company mat. Wooden desks go on the turn order track and on the time track. All of your transformers go in their spots on your grid board. Your electrical towers go across the top, then take the leftmost one and place it into sector A2. 5 bulldozers go into the side of your board, with one of them going to any of the construction sites in A2. And your wind farms go below the bulldozers, with one of them going into A2 sector. Your energy marker starts at 1, and your 5 income markers go in the leftmost spots of their respective rows. Each player gets their set of 8 basic action cards. Your starting connection tile, along with 1 battery, $25, and your 7 network tiles are placed below your board. Take each player's time track disc and place them in a random stack. Then put the turn order discs in the same order from left to right. Now, the game is split into a variable number of years, but each year consists of the action phase, where each player will take 3 actions, then the consolidation phase, where you'll be resetting your area along with generating batteries and money, then the turn order phase, where the turn order is redefined, and in some years, scoring will happen. On a player's turn during the action phase, they will place one of their action markers on the next available action marker spot. Then they'll take one of 3 actions, either play an action card, retrieve all their action cards, or take a battery. Since most of the game revolves around playing an action card, let's start with that. Everything to do in Pampero revolves around playing an action card. There are 2 parts to the action card, the frame and the card effect. The information in the frames is identical on the top and bottom. When you play a card, you're going to place it on your company mat, either along the top or the bottom in the leftmost open space. In the spot that you place it, the frame will match up with what is required to play the card. Cards with an orange frame will show you which zone the action will be taking place when you place your card on the board, while grey cards do not apply to the map at all, but they still take up a spot on your board. If you want to take an action in one of the map zones, A, B, or C, the card you play must be in a spot that allows it. Spots on your player board have two sides, with different costs and zones. So if I wanted to take the action on this card in the A zone, I'd place it here. Well, if I wanted to go in the B zone, I would make sure it's shifted over to show the B side. This will then show you the cost and the benefits you receive. So, to play this action in the A zone, it will cost $5. I have to build and then move a bulldozer. If I own a bulldozer, I pay the money to the bank. If I use another player's bulldozer, I give them the money. Anything that is red is always a cost. Green is stuff you're going to be receiving. Some cards have an alternate cost where it gives you a choice of how to play for the card. If there's a requirement listed on the card, it will also show you if it has to be yours, which is this icon, another player's, which is this one, or it can be either. For this card, a bulldozer must be moved, but can either be mine or someone else's. If it's someone else's, I will pay them the costs listed in the zone, and then they will get to move their bulldozer once my action is done. But you still get to take the action where the bulldozer was. Now before I get into talking about the card actions, let's quickly go over your grid board. The top of the board is your income track. The progress on these tracks is restricted by your electrical towers, and this is going to be very important. You cannot go past the dark green section until you have placed your first electrical tower in that section. So at the beginning of the game, the maximum you can move any income marker is here. When you place the next two, it unlocks the next section and so on. Your electrical towers are also key to expanding your capabilities. They are always built from left to right. They control your income markers, the types of contracts you can fulfill, and where you can place your contracts in your grid sections. The energy track across the bottom is the only thing on your grid board that's not governed by the electrical towers. Now, since I mentioned contracts, there are 6 different kinds of contracts, standard ones and non-standard contracts. The non-standard contracts are remote contracts and solar contracts. And some action cards may make a distinction between standard or non-standard contracts. Often these contracts will have income arrows on them. When you fulfill the contracts, you're going to be moving your income marker of that type. So now let's go through the action cards. To build an electrical tower, you play your card and pay the costs. Take an electrical tower from your grid board and place it into an empty construction zone that can take a tower that also has a bulldozer on it. Then you can take 2 bonus tiles from the bonus tile board. They have to be next to each other, and if you built in Zone A, they both have to be in the Zone A area of the bonus board. If you built in B, they can either be in A or B, as long as they're orthogonally adjacent to each other. Perform the bonus action of the chosen tiles. The board itself also has some pre-printed bonus on it which are not removed, but can be picked as a bonus in the usual way. Remember that part of this action requires moving the bulldozer. Now the owner of the bulldozer decides where it's going to go using the normal movement rules, which I'll talk about in a minute. To build a wind farm, play your card with the normal costs and place a windmill in an empty construction space that can take a windmill, again that has a bulldozer as well. Building wind farms will always generate you energy. Now on some of the cards there is a connection bonus section. You start with a bonus connection tile, but you can get more during the game. When you play a card with one of these, you can place your connection bonus tile on it to receive its bonus. That bonus stays on that card until that card is retrieved, and you can play it again on the same card or a different card that has that section on it. Let's talk about moving a bulldozer now, as the previous 2 actions both required the moving of a bulldozer, and it's whoever is the owner of the bulldozer has that option. They can either move it to another empty construction zone in the same zone or an adjacent zone. They could move it to the utility zone, or move one of their bulldozers from the utility zone to any area on the board. Or they can move it from the utility zone into one of the parking zones and claim that bonus. But if it's parked, it can no longer be used again for the rest of the game. The next couple of cards deal with fulfilling a contract, either a standard contract, remote, or selling to a foreign market. Play a card in the zone you want to fulfill the contract in. There must be an electrical tower in the zone. Again, if it's yours, you pay the bank. If you're using someone else's electrical tower, you're going to be paying them. You can only fulfill contracts of certain types and in certain zones, again, based on your grid zone and the electrical towers you've already placed out. At the beginning of the game, you can only fulfill residential, remote, and solar contracts, and only in Zone A or B. As you place more electrical towers, you gain access to more contracts. Spend the energy required that's listed beside the contract, then you take the contract and place it in your grid board and move your transformer to the spot you just fulfilled in. You have to start from the left transformer, and it can only again go as far as your electrical towers have unlocked. There are further restrictions on placing, but I'm not going to go into those. But whenever you cover up a spot with a contract, you get to take that bonus. Then for that fulfilled contract, you're going to be gaining income as shown on the contract. You move the appropriate income marker, again remembering the thresholds of your electrical towers. There are some special contracts on the board. These are linked contracts. For one action and one payment of the zone cost, you can complete both contracts as long as you can pay for them. There's contract pairs, and as soon as one side is fulfilled, the other one is automatically discarded. And there are connection tiles, which both sides need to be fulfilled, and the player who completed the connection will take that connection bonus tile. Fulfilling a remote contract works essentially the same way, but the energy or battery cost is listed on the tile itself, not pre-printed on the board. Selling to a foreign market, you can only access these if you play a card into Zone B on your company mat. Spend the batteries as listed on the card, advance your income markers as it shows, then flip the card over and keep it in front of you. Taking venture capital gets you money, but it must be repaid at the end of the game. Take the listed money and also get income from your highest income marker in the zone that you place the venture capital tile above. And again, you can only take these tiles if you have unlocked the zone with the electrical towers. So those are the basic actions of the game. You can get upgraded specialist actions during the game, but they're all going to be variations of these actions. Now, instead of playing an action card for your action, you can take a turn just to retrieve all your action cards, as long as you have played 2 or more cards. If you do, you'll also move your time marker forward 1 step and move your turn marker down to the bottom. The third action you can do is just take a battery. Then move your turn order disc to the bottom if not already there. When all players have done their 3 actions, the action phase ends. We then go to the consolidation phase. Remove your 3 action markers from your player mat. Retrieve 1 action card, and it must be the rightmost of either the top or the bottom row. Then you produce batteries. Check where your energy marker is. Go straight up until you reach your electrical towers, and then for each space there and to the left that is empty, you get a battery. Next, you're going to be collecting income. Look at all your income markers and gain the money listed below them. Then advance your time track disc 1 space. Next is the turn order phase. Any discs that are left on the top row are put aside. The discs on the bottom row are placed so that the player who is furthest along the time track is going to go first. Then, the discs that were set aside are then placed back on the time track order. Next is the scoring phase, and this is not always going to happen. If all players have reached or crossed the first scoring phase on the time track, then the first scoring tile is evaluated. And in a normal game, you're just going to be evaluating the top of the first scoring marker. Players can also play their specialty scoring cards now, if they have any. If all players' discs have passed the second scoring marker, then the second scoring stage is going to happen. This time you're going to be evaluating the bottom of the card. Players again can score any specialty scoring cards. And then finally, the game is over when everybody's time disc has reached to pass the final space on the scoring track. At this time, evaluate the final scoring tile, and this time you're going to be evaluating the entire tile. Play any specialist scoring cards, evaluate any end-of-game tower bonus tiles. Then you have to pay back your investors $30 for each venture capital tile that you have. Then, the player with the most money is the winner. Now, I've skipped over a lot of the little rules in this overview, but still want to give you enough information so you can see how this game flows. So with that, let's get back to see what I thought about Pampero.
Let's start with theme and components. I really do like the theme in this one, but I am kind of a sucker for these kind of real-world themes in board games. The idea of building up green energy to fulfill contracts makes thematic sense. But that's kind of where the theme ends. Though the game is called Pampero, and I apologize, I keep on pronouncing either Pampero or Pampero. My apologies for that. But from my understanding, that is a burst of cold wind, but it really doesn't play into the gameplay. Yes, you're building wind farms, but it's not in connection to the namesake. And the theme really doesn't help the gameplay, as it's definitely more abstract. But still, I like that they went with this theme. For the components, I really don't like saying this, but the game is almost overproduced and unnecessarily so. I do like the wooden bits, but the main board is just too big. Saying it is a table hog is definitely an understatement, and it doesn't need to be. There's so much empty space on that main board. The player boards are good, and I like the double layer grid boards, but it just feels so big, and I'm not sure that that largeness is warranted. And again, this is just a minor gripe, but it is something to consider that if you want to get this one to the table, well, you better have a large table for the main board and all the player company and grid boards that go around it. But honestly, for me, games always come down to, of course, the gameplay. And I can say, I really like this game. My favorite part of this game all has to do with that hand management and the timing of when things are triggered. And I really like games where players decide and to get to determine when things happen to this game. That scoring doesn't happen until everyone's passed that line. You don't get your cards back unless you take an action to do it. So that main mechanism of hand management is the core of this game. Taking action to return all your cards seems almost like a wasted turn, but it's often necessary. but I found trying to minimize that action over the entire gameplay to be very important. So when you play your cards, and you're thinking of what card you're going to be getting back, combined with the cards you have left over, is a fun puzzle to solve basically at the end of every round. Sometimes it's unavoidable, and sometimes it will be strategic to affect that timing track and when things are going to score. The card actions themselves are actually pretty straightforward, which I appreciated, as the actual execution is kind of where the decision point lands. Now, I want to build an electrical tower. It's easy, I play my card to do it. But do I use my bulldozer that's in area B, or do I use another player's and give them the money, but it maybe open up opportunities for me to maybe complete contracts where I'm not already am, which I really enjoyed. And with the reasonably tight early economy, giving anything to other players, especially early on in the game, is something that needs to be weighed. Are you getting more out of what you're out of the transaction than they are? Since money is victory points in the game, you're essentially giving them victory points. So you better make sure it's worth it. But I love that it's an option, that I can use your things. You know, I see you sprinting off with your bulldozer on the opposite side of the board where I'm not. Well, maybe I'll just use yours so I don't have to spend my precious actions getting my bulldozer there. This also means that you're never completely out of an area, which I always appreciate. Yes, there's only a limited number of spots, but you know, if I see you're there, maybe I'll just use your stuff. Now, the game is not all roses. I do feel the game could have been simplified or streamlined a bit. For example, when completing a contract, the basics are you spend the energy in the region that the contract is in. But then you have to check, have you unlocked that region and the type through your electrical towers? Can you even move your income marker again because you're limited by how many electrical towers you have out? Where are you going to put that on your grid board? I do like that, but definitely playing with new players, it's something you have to remind them about almost every time, especially early on about those contracts. In the consolidation phase, income makes perfect sense. The new batteries is a little weird. Depending on your energy track, you go up, and then for each empty electrical tower to the left of your energy marker, you get a battery, except for the first one because it doesn't have a battery on the little cutout. It just feels, I'm not sure, like a little clunky. Like the turn order. Put aside everyone who's not already moved the marker down, then the down markers are then placed back up on the turn order track based on the time track order. Then you put the ones that are set aside back in the time track orders. I'm not sure what that accomplishes, actually. And another minor quibble I have is the reliance on those scoring tiles. And there is a variant in the book about a longer game which lessens that impact, which I definitely prefer and would suggest, that's the way to go. The first scoring usually gives you money based on certain things, like the number of batteries you have or the number of electrical towers in Area B, for example. And the second score usually awards the person who has the most of something, like the most deployed wind farms, gets the money. This means that with a normal, I'll call it short game, most players are just going to be solely concentrating on that first scoring since it's a good way to get money. I feel that just means players were essentially doing the same thing. Oh, I get $3 per battery? Okay, well I guess I'm going to be working on getting batteries. With a longer game, you generate income during the actual gameplay itself. So I almost wish that was the default, as it allows players to kind of explore more of the game itself, but still keeping that economy relatively tight. So, would I recommend Pampero? For sure, if you're looking for something on the heavier side and don't mind that learning curve, this is one you should definitely check out, as I thoroughly enjoyed my plays of this one. I really like the real-life theme in this one, even if it's not integrated into the gameplay as much as I would have liked it. I loved the hand management in this one. Every card I played was a meaningful decision, along with that card recall. You'll probably need to do this, but making sure that timing is right is so key. I also like the games that are tight economies, and this one's no exception. Again, early on, it does open up a bit more as the gameplay goes on, but I appreciate the ability to use other players' pieces as well. But having to pay them for knowing how tight things could be was great. The main loop of this game is pretty straightforward, but the little nuances made this game more enjoyable. And one thing I didn't even talk about was those bonuses that you take when you're building an electrical tower. Sometimes it's just the right boost you need at just the right time. I also like the option to get more cards and stronger cards, and when given that option, making the choice to take another action card or a scoring card. And even those scoring cards, they're fun as well. When do you play them? Use them early when things are tighter, or wait until the last scoring, as once they've been used during a scoring phase, they're discarded out of the game. Now for the cons, there's really not that many. I do think the game takes up more space than it really needs and is overproduced. And I also feel this game could have used some cutting or trimming or something like that. I really like the core gameplay, but all the little extra rules seem like they could have been trimmed and still kept that fun of the core gameplay. So overall, I'm going to give this one an 8.5 out of 10 and the Dice Tower Seal of Excellence. This was a game that I originally didn't own myself, but I played it at a friend's copy and I couldn't stop thinking about how I wanted to play it differently the next time I got to the table. So I just had to go out and buy my own copy and get it to the table multiple times after that. And I know this game is not going to be for everyone, but if this looks interesting at all, I would say this is one you should definitely try. But that's it for the moment. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching another video on the Dice Tower. Hey, do you want to know what's going on with Dice Tower? Do you want to know about our events, our cruises, special things that we're going to do live here in the Dice Tower? Subscribe to Dice Tower Digest. Go to dicetowerdigest.com. It's a newsletter that we send out bi-weekly. We won't use your email for anything else. This is just to get you some information about the Dice Tower so you'll be up to date. Thanks for watching.